seconds. Here we go. Going live. All right, and we're live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Audio Programmer Meetup. And it's March now, which means that we have actually officially been doing this now for 1 year. So this is our 1 year anniversary of the Audio Programmer Meetup. And I wanted to thank everybody who has joined us for any of these meetups. And it's been great connecting with all of you. And we hope that we can continue this on into the future. As you can see, Teamer is not here with us at the moment. He was feeling unwell, and so he wasn't able to make it. And so let's all wish him get well soon. And I'm sure he'll be back with us next month. We have two great guests for us with us today. We have Pavel Novikov from Align Technology, and we have Jose Diaz from Ableton. Welcome, Jose.
Hi.
Yeah, so before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. So thank you to Juice, Sonux, and Focusrite for sponsoring the Audio Programmer Meetup. Like I said, they've been with us for the past year, and these meetups would not be possible without them. So thank you to Juice, Sonux, and Focusrite for hanging with us and supporting the audio programmer community. So we can go ahead and get started right away. And first we have Pavel. And one thing that I'd like to say before we get started is that this is going to be a meetup that's going to be geared towards people who are looking to get into audio software development. So if you're just getting started, or even if you haven't started yet and you're looking to get started, I think this is a great meetup for you, because we're going to discuss two of the most common questions that we get in the audio programmer community, one of which is, what are some of the basic fundamentals that we need to know if we wanted to be audio developers? And Pavel is going to talk about that. And then normally the second question that comes right after that is, well, how do I get a job in the industry? What do I need to do? What skills do I need to know in order to get a job at a company like Ableton? And we've talked about those sort of things a couple times, but I think it's just great to hear different people's experiences. And so we have Jose, and we're going to discuss that and more. Jose has just been newly hired by Ableton, so he's only been there for a couple weeks now, and I think it'll be great to get a fresh experience from somebody who has just kind of made it in the industry and just getting started, and the steps that he needed to take to get there. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll start with Pavel. And Pavel got an engineering degree in missilery from BMSTU. He loves C++ and knows how to cook it. He likes metaprogramming, multi-threading, and asynchronous programming, and is a coroutine adoption enthusiast. So he knows his C++. And today he's going to speak to us about building intuition for sample rate and aliasing. Take it away, Pavel.
Yes, thank you. Let me share my screen.
And as he's sharing a screen, one thing that would be great is if you have any questions in the chat, please precede those with question in all caps so I can see them easily and I'll be able to ask Pavel. And we're also going to be asking these questions during the chat as well. So if you have questions about what he's actively discussing, please ask, and then we will ask him pretty much right on the spot. Over to you, Pavel.
Yes, thank you. Sorry for showing my ceiling and for weird camera angle and for not looking at the camera, but I need to operate my computer in order to tell you about all this. And we'll try to build intuition for sample rate and aliasing. First of all, first of all, disclaimer, I'm a programmer and I will talk about audio basically, but I'm not audio programmer. And please, Josh, post this link to chat. Please go to this link, go nuts with the toys. You maybe want to leave me in the background and listen to me in the background while you are playing with the toys. And when you are done, you probably may come back and listen to some explanation about it. So anyway, go nuts with it, please. And let me go to this page. This is basically the page that you have the link to by now. And we'll talk about sample rate, first of all, and we'll try to internalize and get intuition for the phenomena called aliasing. So sample rate is somewhat straightforward. So when we want to convert analog continuous signal to digital signal, we want probably to measure the signal from time to time. And these measurements or sampling will give us some values or samples, so-called samples. And here for this continuous signal, the blue line, which evolves along the horizontal axis, we measure it from time to time, and we get values which are represented by these circles, which get some position in the horizontal axis, which corresponds to the value of the sample. So when we're sampling, we can sample at some irregular intervals, but it helps a lot to analyze and process the digitized signal when we sample at regular steady intervals. When we do that, we can talk about sample rate. So sample rate is the rate at which we measure the signal, in other words, sampling the signal. And sample rate is measured in hertz. So it's like some number of times per second. And we can play with this demo a little bit, and we can see that when the signal changes, our measurement and corresponding samples are changed as well. So, okay, now that we got samples, if we want to just get samples and do some digital processing with it or some analysis, we can stop right there. But oftentimes, we want to get that some processed digital signal back to analog signal, to continuous signal. For example, when we play audio back from our digital players, we have to convert that digital samples into like electrical signals and then to pressure waves, air pressure waves. So having the samples, what should we do to convert that signal, that digital signal, into analog signal? Do we use just horizontal straight lines? Do we use segments connecting the samples, or do we use like some strange shape? To address this, we have a theory called Whittaker-Nyquist-Kotelnikov-Shannon sampling theorem. This is of 4 people. That's how much people discovered and rediscovered this theory. And I think that to understand this theory, first to look at so-called Fourier series will help us. So here we have our initial function, initial signal, which is a step. It has discontinuity here. So here the signal changes instantaneously. But anyway, we can work with it, and we can represent this signal with a sum of some signs. So here is one sign that approximates this signal, and we can add some more signs in the sum to approximate better and better this signal. Eventually, it gets somewhat close, I'd say, but it will never get close, or rather, I'd say that theoretically, it will get exactly to the shape of the initial signal, but with the sum of infinite number of signs. And in practice, this is impossible because we can't sum infinite number of signs. And this step function, we cannot represent this step function with signs in practice. And but we can represent it with some order of like closeness approximation. And here you can see this approximation with the 10,000 signs, with the sum of 10,000 signs. It gets pretty close, but nevertheless, it's not exactly. It doesn't represent exactly the initial signal. So what we can do with this is actually we can like work it backwards in the reverse direction, and we can filter unwanted high frequencies of this signal. And when we limit our frequencies, our loud frequencies to say 37 first frequencies, we get this signal. This is the filtered representation of this initial step function, step signal. And so eventually what the Nyquist-Shannon theorem says is that you can reconstruct the samples exactly if the initial signal is band limited and we pass this reconstructed signal through low pass filter. Low pass filter means that we pass all the low frequencies and filter out all the high frequencies. So basically here, if we come back to this, we can say that all we need to do is just use any shape and then to reconstruct the signal and then pass this signal through a low pass filter, and we will reconstruct the initial signal exactly. If our initial signal satisfies all the constraints, namely it is band limited. So I hope it makes sense for you. Let's look at another example. So here we have our initial signal is sine wave, and we get some samples evenly spaced, and we can with this slider change the frequency of our initial signal, and we see that our samples change with the initial signal, and nevertheless we can reconstruct almost perfectly the initial signal from that samples. So the initial signal is blue, and the reconstructed signal is orange. We can look at another example here. So here is the initial signal is the square wave. You may have heard about that, which is used very widely in audio production and not only audio production. And we can see that when we sample our step, or rather square wave in some way, we get samples, and after reconstruction, we get this approximation, basically, of this square wave. And because this square wave has a discontinuity, we can't represent it with limited bandwidth, with limited frequencies. And yeah, I should have added that this is not possible in practice because you can see, you can look at this in two ways. One way is that we need an infinite sum of an infinite signs with like smaller and smaller frequencies and amplitudes. Or since this change is instantaneous, we need like at some point we need a term, a summand in this sum with infinite frequency to represent this instantaneous change. And in practice, neither of this is possible. So we get reconstruction like this. So we get like some wavy approximation of the square wave. And when you, for example, choose in your synthesizer wave shape which is square, you have to understand that what you get eventually is this wavy approximation. Okay, let's go to sine wave. Maybe we have questions. Please interrupt me and jump in at any moment.
No questions so far. Seems pretty clear explanation, but if anybody has any questions, please let us know in the chat.
Okay, I like to joke that either everything is clear or nothing is clear.
That's right.
Okay. So when we increase the frequency of the initial signal, at some point we get less than perfect approximation. So I hope, yes, you can see that it starts to break down. This happens because the floating point that is used is not perfect. It's forgot what. Okay, never mind. It's not perfect. We can't perfectly calculate with that. And my algorithm that reconstructs the signal is also not perfect. I cheated a little bit. So, okay, what happens when we increase our frequency even further? And here we see that we are at the so-called Nyquist frequency. Nyquist frequency is, by definition, half of the sampling frequency. So if our sampling frequency is like 48 kilohertz, our Nyquist frequency is 24 kilohertz, half of the sampling frequency. And here we can see that we have exactly 2 samples per period. So this is a period, we have 2 samples, and for every period we have 2 samples. And we are unlucky here, in fact, because all our samples have fallen to 0 value, and we get just a straight line after reconstruction. So here, this is the point where we are at Nyquist frequency. If we go back a little bit, it starts to get better. But if we go past the Nyquist frequency, look what happens. As we increase the frequency of the initial signal, the frequency of the reconstructed signal decreases. So you see that there are more and more like periods filled within this space, but there are less and less periods of the reconstructed signal that we reconstruct from our samples. And basically, this is aliasing. So after we pass the Nyquist frequency, our when the frequency of the initial signal increases, the frequency of the reconstructed signal decreases, and at some point we get unlucky again, and all our samples get to 0 again, because it so happened that we sample at points where our initial signal crosses the 0 line. And after that, if we go even further, as the frequency of the initial signal, which is blue, still increases, this frequency of the reconstructed signal decreases as well. So this is still a aliasing, and everything that's above Nyquist frequency gives us aliasing. And this happens infinitely as the initial frequency increases. The frequency of the reconstructed signal increases up to Nyquist frequency, then decreases up to down to 0, and then again increases up to Nyquist frequency, and so on and so forth. Okay, let's look at a practical example. So here we have, okay, I forgot to excuse me, I forgot to turn on the sound.
That's okay. Take your time. Well, while he's doing that, just wanted to remind you for continuing the discussion, please join our audio programming community on Discord. So it's a great place to connect with other audio developers, and you can join us on theaudioprogrammer.com/community.
Okay, let's try again. Can you hear it?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay. You can't hear it,
No,
right?
no, can't.
Okay, this is my fault.
It's okay.
What should I do? Should I reload the browser?
Yeah, give that a try. Here we go. And I will paste the link in again for people who are looking to follow along. So even if we aren't able to get this working, you will still be able to listen in the browser.
Yeah, you can totally go to this page and experiment it yourself. Strange. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try it.
No luck, unfortunately.
Okay, maybe my microphone will pick it up. Oh no, we will have echo.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think if you just describe what it.
Okay, the idea was that when we play a sine signal that is like changes frequencies, we can see that there is. Can you hear it?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay, never mind. Oh, I know what to do.
Okay. Yeah, we hear something. That's a bit loud. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't want to torture you with high frequency sounds. Let's try.
That sounds great.
Okay, I can hear it.
Yeah, for people who are listening in your headphones, you may want to just turn this down a little bit. We don't want to break your ears. So,
so the idea here is that we can reproduce sine wave. Like the initial signal is the sine wave, but I will stop it. Most of the most interesting, I'm sorry for that phrasing, effects are nonlinear, and nonlinear effects can add frequencies. And well, I'll try to. Can you hear that?
Yep, all good.
Okay, so this is distorted sound. This is undistorted sound. Let me just. I hope you can hear it and you hear the difference. Otherwise, okay, you can experiment it yourself. What happens with when we have distortion is that we have additional high frequencies, high harmonics. So for this signal, we have like second, third, fourth, and some like high order harmonics. And when we increase the frequency of the initial signal, we see that the frequency of the harmonics increases also as well. So this is a linear scale, not logarithmic, that you might be used to. And we can see that after the highest harmonic bumps into the Nyquist frequency, it starts to go back. And the same happens with the other harmonics. They bump into the Nyquist frequency and start to go back. And this happens, so here the highest harmonic was reflected from the Nyquist frequency, went all the way to the zero frequency ODC, and when we increase the frequency, it starts to go back. So this is basically the same process that we saw earlier. Okay, now what we can do about it? We don't want like this mess when we use intensively nonlinear effects on our signals. We can use oversampling. So let me try to play an example. Okay, I hope you heard that. This is with distortion. And you can see how all the high harmonics bounce back and forth between 0 and Nyquist frequency. Nyquist frequency in this case is 8 kilohertz, since our sample rate is 16 kilohertz. And this is the undistorted signal. So you can see it like a little bit clearer, like a little bit crispier. And this is the distorted sound. And all like different effects happen. And I'd say that sometimes, and most of the times, these bouncing effects like rising and falling tones are unwanted when we process our signal. So what we can do, we can use oversampling. So here we upsample our initial signal twice. So our upsampled Nyquist frequency becomes 16 kilohertz compared to 80 kilohertz of the initial signal. And we can see that the bouncing reduced by 2 times. So we have like more frequency space to accommodate for all this crazy aliasing of high harmonics. Okay, next we can do is filter our upsampled signal. So we keep only the lowest frequencies and filter out the highest frequencies that we don't need actually. Because after downsampling back to the initial sample rate, we will not be able to reproduce those frequencies anyway. So now we can see that if we just leave a little bit more frequency data, we can see that bouncing have been reduced significantly. And we can try to play. Honestly, I can hear a little bit of the aliasing, and what we can do is we can use oversampling with higher frequency, basically. So we oversample 4 times, and our Nyquist frequency was 8 kilohertz, and sample rate 16 kilohertz, and we multiply everything by 4. And now we have Nyquist frequency 32 kilohertz, and this is the original non-filtered processed with distortion signal. And we can see that bouncing happens primarily at high frequencies, and only one. We are unhappy that we have only one, the highest frequency, the highest harmonic, bouncing back to basically 0. Okay, we can again filter this, and now we can leave only the lowest quarter, like contents, frequency contents. And what we can back is, I'd say, much better, because bouncing was reduced compared to 2x oversampling. And we can, I'll try to play it again. So yeah, we can hear it a bit, but I hope you get the idea. So you have to play with the cutoff frequency when you filter the oversampled signal. And in practice, you will use up to 16x oversampling, and probably you will use 48 kilohertz for your initial signal, or even higher. And so we can see that for 48 kilohertz, all the unwanted aliasing happens at really high frequencies, and we can filter it out like this. So all the unwanted aliasing happens in the frequency space that we filter out, and we get somewhat cleared from aliasing effects signal back. And basically that's it, I think. Please ask questions. I will be happy to expand on anything you maybe didn't catch.
Yeah, I think that either everybody understands what you're saying or nobody understands what you're saying. But I think these visualizations, there have been a lot of positive comments about the visualization and how great it is, essentially. Yeah, so really nice. And I think I have a question maybe to kick things off if nobody else has questions. So what inspired you to look into this and to start looking into audio? Was it just curiosity, or?
Yes, it was curiosity. I'm I think I'm curious like by nature, and I like to figure out how stuff works. And I was enthusiastic about audio for a long time. And some time ago, I watched a YouTube video about this topic, and it clicked for me. And but like you cannot play with this demonstration in the video, so I decided to make interactive toys.
Yeah, that's great. And tell us about your job now. What do you do? So what you're doing now doesn't have anything to do with audio?
It has nothing to do with signal processing in my like immediate job. So I don't know. Is this relevant somehow?
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I don't know if we have any questions. Just a lot of positive comments just about the visualization and how that was done. So,
Yeah.
did you write that in JavaScript, or how did you do
Yeah, thanks for this question. I'd like to geek out about that. I wrote it in JavaScript and HTML and CSS as usual, and also I needed an FFT library to perform like signal to frequency domain and back transformation. And it happens that I didn't find JavaScript library that satisfies my needs and that is fast enough. And while programming that, I had to get familiar with EM scripting and WebAssembly and all that stuff.
Wow,
It was
amazing.
a lot of fun.
Yeah, sounds like it. How long did it take you to do it?
I think like a couple of months in
Mm,
free time.
yeah, very nice.
Yeah, now I have to finish the text. This is it turned out to be the hardest part.
Yeah, and what does Align Technology do? Somebody Googled it and said it looks like it's a medical technology company. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah, that's right. Yes, correct.
So
Uh,
there, yeah.
I'd say the primary product is Invisalign system that how do you say it? Orthodontic system that like moves your teeth and corrects your bite and teeth position.
Yeah.
Yeah, we the team I'm working in works on the application for doctors.
Wow.
So doctors can interface with that development like system.
That's great. We have another question. Do you have any library recommendations for building blocks for frequency domain processing, like FFT, STFT? Any any library recommendations? Sounds like you
So
were pretty dissatisfied with what was out there.
yeah, I found FFT.js
Okay.
library. It was like pretty fast, honestly, but it had no inverse transform for real data. So you had to um, inverse transform the whole spectrum data and then like get rid of the imaginary part. And that was like roughly twice as slow if you don't take into account that you have real data input.
I see.
And,
Have you done any in C++ before? Have you done FFT with C++?
yes. And I took like infamous, like not infamous, widely known in narrow circles library called KissFFT, which is written in C and it is really easily used and can be integrated into your application. So it was after I figured out the WebAssembly stuff, it was like almost trivial to integrate it into the web page.
Mm. What was it called again?
KISS, KISSFFT.
KISS FFT. I haven't heard about that one. That's interesting. Okay. Let's see. Do we have any more questions from the people watching? I'll give a couple seconds because we're on a couple second delay, just to give people an opportunity to ask any questions. While we're waiting, are you going to be doing some more audio in the future then, as a hobby?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to figure out filtering stuff and nonlinear effects and like whatnot.
Yeah. Amazing. Great. Looks like we're done with questions. Thank you very much, Pavel. And that was really awesome. I will paste the link one more time in the chat, and I will also put this in the video description as well for people to have a play around with. Absolutely essential knowledge for anybody who is trying to learn the fundamentals of digital signal processing and aliasing, oversampling, and things like that. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pavel. Great. So now moving on, we're going to now speak with Jose. And Jose Diaz is he is a software engineer at Ableton. And how long have you been in Ableton now, Jose? About 2 weeks, 3 weeks now?
This is the beginning of week 4.
Week 4. Yeah, so nearly at your 1 month anniversary. And
that's right.
And just to read your bio, you're previously a musician and a recording engineer. You're from Brooklyn, right? You're from Brooklyn, New York?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you entered the audio software industry after graduate studies at NYU's music technology program. Originally focused on audio plugin development, you're now interested in building larger systems. And thank you very much for joining us. How are you enjoying Berlin so far?
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot to adjust to. You know, full disclosure, when I landed in Berlin on the 5th of February, it was the first time I'd been in Europe, and not in an airport, and not in. Well, I mean, I guess the UK isn't. You know, I've been to the UK. I've never been to Europe. Never been to Germany. Never been to Berlin. So it's a whole lot at once. But it's fantastic. You know, I'm getting myself set up, and it's really. It's really cool here. Everything's locked down though, so it's really hard to get a real flavor for what it's actually like here. But I mean, generally, it seems like it went away. Sorry. Generally, it seems like a great place.
Yeah. What was the first thing that you noticed that was one of the biggest differences between the US and Europe?
That is a great question. I mean, the architecture is so much different than New York. You know, Brooklyn especially. I didn't grow up in Brooklyn, but I've been living in Brooklyn since 2016. I had been. And Brooklyn, you know, is all single family homes. There's it's predominantly, not even predominant, but there's a lot of single family homes, a lot of brownstones, right? That like are kind of repurposed into like 3 apartment dwellings that are kind of, but here, yeah, for example, here I'm in this huge like apartment block with a garden zone in the middle of it, and that feels like, and all the buildings are way shorter here. So I was like, this just the nature of the space is completely different here.
Yeah. One of the first things that I noticed when I moved to Europe or moved here to England was how early things close. I don't remember if it's that way in Berlin or not, but everything used to shut here, and it still does for the most part, at 5 o'clock, 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and that's it. I don't know if I'm still used to that. That's a pretty big change.
That's kind of early. Well, here things close at like Sunday. On Sunday, stuff is shut.
Yeah. Not like us in America with 24-hour service. Yeah. So it'd be great to talk a little bit about your background. So you said that you're a musician and a recording engineer. So were you actively working in the studio? What sort of instruments did you play?
So basically what happened was in 2009, I graduated from Temple University with a degree in anthropology. And I decided to move to Seattle and start a rock band because I wanted to be in a rock band. I wanted to sing rock music and play guitar and all that, and tour and all that stuff. That experience led to me very quickly to recording myself, my band, and then recording other people. and then working in larger studios and doing internships and things like that, and getting to work on some cool records. So after a few years of that, I moved to New York and ended up working in a commercial studio in downtown in Lower Manhattan, recording and mixing music for TV and for TV shows and for commercials. So it was then that I finally got to work full time though, because I had been, working at grocery stores and at coffee shops and things like that during most of the time when I was an active musician and audio engineer. But then finally I moved to New York and I got this gig where I got to do it full time. And that's when I realized that it wasn't really a great fit for me. I didn't like the hours just weren't working for me. The idea of having to be on call, I didn't like it as much. And also I felt like the economics of that industry have just shifted to a certain extent that personally it felt like I was going to have to put a lot more in order to see stability or even wealth uh, going forward. So I was like, I need to figure something else. My wife just laughed at me for saying wealth, but
and what led to your curiosity to get into audio software development specifically?
I'd always had a really close relationship to my tools. I was in that generation, I think, of people starting up where it was cheap enough to buy, Pro Tools and like an O3 and then start messing around with crappy little plugins. And it definitely was, I mean, if you really were trying to like maybe build some kind of business, right? That was far cheaper than putting together a competent multi-track tape recording system. But the thing was at the time, it all still kind of sucked, right? So and that's it sucked in terms of stability, in terms of sound quality, in terms of features. But it was what it was. It worked enough. And I think over time, actually, I've always been kind of obsessed. Like when I was in high school, I was trying to figure out how to record stuff, and it seemed like the easiest way was through digital technology. I really wanted a Mac on an iBook so I could like use GarageBand, you know? And so I've actually always just been really obsessed with the actual recording part, and that's always been associated with me to the computer. And then over time, I guess it was me being obsessed with the computer and the DAW, and then also the different plugins I was using and how that kind of affected my workflow, whether that made things easier for me or harder for me. So when I decided to go back to school, I was trying to figure out what my focus would be. And basically the first thing I thought was, well, I'd like to work on audio plugins. I'd like to work on audio software. But the thing was, I didn't really have any kind of conception of myself as a person who could do that stuff. I was a musician. I was a liberal arts person. I was an audio engineer. So like doing things like DSP or computer programming, that seemed like totally out of things that I could do, right? But that's definitely like the first thing that I thought to myself. So I had to abstract that too. Well, I want to do work that benefits people who work with sound, and that was kind of the viewpoint that I went into my graduate studies with. That I was going to try to find a way to direct my studies in order to do that. And it turned out to turn into this.
Amazing. And so tell me about your initial foray into programming. Was C++ or C the first language that you learned, or was it a different language, doing web programming maybe?
First language that I seriously had a relationship with would be Python. I actually had been, I was just teaching myself Python casually the summer before. Actually, even before I knew that I was going to be going to grad school and was going to be taking a DSP class where we had to do everything in Python. I was going through a Python workbook just to learn the basics. I took a little bit of C++ in high school, but I hadn't made that connection between like digital audio and C++. So I kind of didn't, I kind of just took the class and then I left high school and never thought about it again until reflecting, in recent years, like, oh wow, isn't that funny? Yeah, I knew some Python, and I started with Python, doing, basic DSP stuff, heavily assisted with, different libraries, mostly for doing kind of, like analysis. So like the stuff that Pavel just showed us, but much less cool and interactive, much more like, learning how to do a spectrogram, and learning how to do one the hard way, and learning how to make little signals and stuff like that. And then yeah.
I was going to say, was this on your own that you learned Python and that you decided to explore this direction, or was this through a university program?
I would say yes, because the Python that we learned in our lab for this DSP class was kind of like, we learned as we needed to, so it wasn't really learning Python to learn Python. It was learning how to iterate over something because, we wanted to do some kind of processing task like the hard way without doing a library to demonstrate the context, right? And then also, I feel like there's a lot of that. There was a lot of that in my program. I took a music information retrieval class also, where I feel like in a lot of ways it was a Python class, because, a lot of it was, understanding the concepts of what you're trying to do, and then knowing how to basically write good sorting algorithms to take these like big, tables of multidimensional data and feed them into different classifiers, and then be able to abstract different types of information out of them. So it was a very like goal-oriented Python. But before then, I was just doing this book, Learn Python the Hard Way, where it was just a very like, it was like a code with me type thing, like where it was like literally like, he would show you the code to write, and it was just about like, then there'd be like little exercises, like comment every line, make sure you understand everything, just to kind of learn the general comings and goings of the language.
Mm-hmm. And did you find when you were starting out that way of learning was effective? The code with me style of learning, or following along with tutorials, or did you find that there was a different way for you?
It's hard to say. I think it was really helpful to get me excited about the topic and to motivate me on the topic. But I think it definitely had its limits, and I hit my limit when I was working on my plugin for my thesis, right? And basically all of the C++ knowledge that I had been derived from this kind of code with me types of classes. But then when it came to kind of breaking out of what I had learned in those things and designing my own systems, I totally had no idea how to do it. And actually, through the audio programmer community, Chuck, Matt Cat, he DM'd me, and he suggested that I use templates for something. And I was like, what's a template? And so he suggested that I take his course, right? And I liked his course because it was a combination of a proper C++ course, with just like the rote repetition of just learning how to make classes and things like that, and the conceptual stuff like lambdas. But then it was also like tied to the Juice framework and how we actually like, so the motivation was there. So I guess I like a hybrid, but I think the fundamentals need to be, things got a lot better for me once I started learning fundamentals, I guess is the thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what do you think those fundamentals are? When you say fundamentals, what do you mean by that exactly for people who are just starting?
I suppose what I mean is more C++ focused. And I suppose it's just the basic syntax and context and concepts surrounding the language, like how do you compose class, and I guess maybe fundamental design concepts, so what are classes, right? What is the best way to structure like an object as an idea of a thing that solves some kind of problem or provides a service to other code that calls it, so from very high level stuff to if I see, how do I read a function signature in an API, like what is this thing in the front that this is the thing it returns, and then this is the name of the function, and then this is the argument, like simple stuff like that. And then also so I guess it's not fundamentals. I'm sorry. I'm getting it all mixed up. It's a lot,
Yeah, it is a lot. And I think that you bring up a great point, especially when people start making the transition into C++ and trying to pick up juice, which is that a lot of the problems starting up tend to be C++ problems, language barriers. I know for me, it was definitely that because if you're trying to use an API and you don't really know how to use C++, you're essentially trying to navigate a forest without a map, essentially.
That's exactly, and I think you especially see that in the Juice DSP classes, because they're all really, I think that they're all really cleverly written to be super efficient, right? To be super generic, so you can have flexibility when you're defining them, and also so they don't have to repeat a bunch of code and all that good stuff. That why we do that. But so now I look at it and I think, oh, that's cool. But I know for a fact that the first time I even tried to, and I actually gave up on it, tried to use, I don't know, like the IIR coefficient design thing, because then that's a perfect example actually, because I had a brush with I think it was the semantics of like whether a class or an object is copyable or not, right? And how they had designed it specifically, right? They deleted the copy constructor, right? So then the compiler will not let you copy it. And in an attempt to kind of very firmly tell you, this is not how you use this class, right? But for me, who didn't know what I was doing, all I was like, crap, I don't know what to do then, but then with more kind of with understanding of different kinds of patterns under my belt, it would be a different outcome today.
Yeah, absolutely. And that those DSP classes in Juice can definitely be a challenge if you're just getting started out, because you have a lot of nested namespaces, yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And there's definitely a battle, I think, when it comes to creating audio tools between having low level design where you can really customize something, and having something that is a little bit more accessible and a little bit more easy to use, easy to pick up, especially for a beginner. And yeah, so very interesting. So we had a couple questions. One question was what instrument you played in your rock band?
I played guitar.
Okay, nice. Lead or rhythm guitar?
Yes. Kind of everywhere.
Nice. Who were your influences? Would it be like Hendrix, or was it more like Floyd? Or
it was Pavement. It was just like a very sloppy kind of ego exercise. I wrote the songs, I sang the songs, I told everyone when to show up for practice, all that all that stuff. But the result was weird. It was somehow shambolic, despite all of that type of personality control. Yeah, but I mean, whatever. It was. I mean, it's part of the reason I'm here, and I'm happy that I made that music, and I feel good about it. I feel good about the relationships I built during that time. I met a lot of amazing people, not just the people I was in a band with, but people all over the country, and people that I keep in touch with. Someone in Italy who lives in Milan, who was in my band for for a couple years. So I mean, you really can't. I wouldn't trade that for anything, honestly.
yeah, one question that I wanted to ask was just about the relationship between being able to make audio plugins or do audio programming and needing a background in sound engineering or in playing an instrument. Do you think that that's something that's essential to be an effective audio programmer, or can a person do it without having a background in music? I'm curious to hear your opinion about that.
I think it depends on the type of organization. I think that if you just want to make things yourself, like for yourself as a one-person entity, if you want to be a Valhalla, or if you want to be like a Newfangled Audio, um, you're going to have to, I think you're going to have to be a little bit of everything. Just because you don't have the luxury of specializing like you can at a larger organization. But I don't think you have to, in terms of if you want to be part of a larger organization where you are just doing GUI, or you're writing the business logic for something, or if you're just doing DSP, right? Like, and I think that there are a lot of people who are just passionate about listening to music, and maybe strum a guitar a little bit or something, but aren't serious. But then, they they are also very effective, DSP or computer engineers. And that's something I can actually really identify with, because I feel like my desire and my perceived desire to be an audio engineer and to make music went down severely once I started audio programming. I think personally for me, I felt like I was directing energy towards music still, towards building something. I think it's more important to honestly to know C++. That's, I think, the thing that changed that turned things around for me pretty quickly once I had a real command of the language, or somewhat of a command of the language.
Yeah, and then another question that we had was about the class from Matt Cat Music that you had mentioned. I thought we'd give a shout out to that. So that's called Programming for Musicians. It's a great class from Matt Cat Music on the basics of C++, geared towards musicians. Big shout out to Matt Cat Music. He's coming with another course soon as well, so we'll be giving some more information about that soon. Great. So then you started learning C++. Were they teaching C++ at NYU at all?
Not in the, so the NYU's music tech program is a very academic program that's focused more on things like, it's really focused on music information retrieval right now. They're really focused on audio engineering, like very high level audio engineering, and also 3D audio, and also computer music. So I had to kind of do the C++ part on my own, because I was really, and the important thing to me was that they did give me the space to kind of just do what I wanted, like it was kind of a practice in, well, you want to make this plugin, you just need to shape your thesis in a way that this becomes an academic project where you are, actually like interacting with the extant literature and asking a question that can be solved, that can be answered, or at least somewhat addressed by observing the thing that you made. In my case, it was the thing that I made in a room playing music with three engineers on faculty, and getting their feedback.
Yeah. Really interesting. Does Schiffman teach at NYU? Daniel Schiffman?
I don't think so.
Okay. I know he teaches in New York somewhere. I'm not sure if it's NYU or somewhere else. Do you know who Daniel Schiffman is?
No. Who is he?
So are you familiar with processing or P5JS at all?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he's the person who does the coding train, the weekly live streams. If you're that's kind of the way that I got started, actually, by looking at his tutorials. Daniel Schiffman, and his tutorials were actually a very large inspiration for the audio programmer. Actually, his enthusiasm is, he's amazing. He does these really awesome visualizations and creative computing creations just on the fly. and yeah, he's pretty phenomenal.
That rocks. I just looked him up and he is indeed, I was guessing he is an ITP guy, which I feel like there are a few. So he's probably taught at the music tech program. There's this other guy, Luke Dubois, who's he's a pretty notable kind of information processing based installation artist who also is kind of like mostly an ITP and then kind of once in a while will teach like a 3D, like he's a Max guy, I think, a Max person.
Yeah. Schiffman is amazing. He actually has a book called Nature of Code, which is just about actually coding things that you would see in nature, like branches and curves and random things. And it's pretty, like I said, he's if I had a coding idol, he would definitely be one of the top 2 or 3. Just a phenomenal person. Helped a lot of people like myself get into code for sure.
Nice.
So moving along, so you started working on this plugin. Is that Valentine or was that a different plugin?
Yeah, that was what turned into Valentine.
Okay, great. And what was Valentine for people who don't know?
Valentine was, so I had a little effects rack that I really liked in Ableton that combined a third-party plugin that was a really extreme compressor and bit crushing. I was really trying to get the sound of you remember Justice?
Oh yeah,
That French house. Yeah. So to get that really crunchy, like blown out reverb, bit crushed reverb thing, I was trying to get that and felt like it'd be cool to kind of try to package something like that in a plugin. So it ended up turning into being, a compressor and a distortion with like a clipper in it, and then also, bit crushing and aliasing type distortions and things like that. So I spent, of my 2 years at NYU, I spent the second to last semester working on the processing side, and then I spent the most of my last semester working on implementing a custom GUI and making it, as close to a product as I could have. Because for me, for my professional aspirations, it was important to have something that looked as close to something that I could release as possible. And also just knowing what I knew from the little tiny bit that I'd read, because there's a whole amazing literature on musical interfaces, right? And just like the little bit that I touched about that indicated that at least the way that I was testing it for my thesis, like you couldn't really do it without a real interface. It just doesn't, in my case, that seemed to be what the deal was going to be. So yeah.
So when you say musical interface literature, can you give some examples of some of your inspirations there?
Well, actually, I'm not as influenced by that literature as much as I am influenced by other plugins. I mean, I'm very, very enamored with the way that, the Valhalla plugins look. I just like really flat stuff. And of course, I really like how Newfangled's plugins look. And that's not just because I, had to look at them for a very long time. But for people who are interested, there's a journal called, it's like the acronym is NIME. It's like New Interfaces for Musical Expression or something like that.
That's it.
Yeah.
And they have a conference as well that they do yearly as well. Though I don't. That's all I really know about it. But there are whole theories on interface and interface design that's out there. And so tell me a little bit more about how that was so important to your plugin. The interface design as related to the sound of it.
Well, it was, well, actually, let me just, can I share screen? Yeah, I can. Okay. right? So I had a few things here. And I think that this is a good way of showing. Oh, great. Now it's going to go all the way to this, my notes. Okay, cool, right? So this was the first, very anonymous interface for the plugin, which of course, and I think that kind of speaks to part of my motivation for the project as well, is that, this is an Ableton effects rack that relies on another plugin. So it's not at all portable. So this was something I wanted to share with other people. And then here's the progression of the interfaces over time. As you can see, I started with a very basic, there's actually another one in between. But before I got to even the 060 version, when I showed it to people, just to get a very loose, I started sharing it with audio engineer friends. The majority of their comments were all interface related, even though the interface was the part that was not done. It was all like, I don't know how to, either positive or like, oh, I'm a little confused about how to use this. I'm not sure about even about the intention of this plugin because of the manner in which it operates, especially for a compressor. There are a lot of different ways that you can change its means of operation that have severe implications for its interface. Like in my case, right, I chose for it to operate like an 1176 in a sense, right, where there is a fixed threshold point, or at least there's a fixed threshold point over the course of an input. And the way that you increase the amount of compression, right, is by driving it harder, by delivering more signal to it. So for some people that can feel like a counterintuitive workflow if they're used to a plugin that's more like an SSL plugin, or like even like a normal the stock Ableton plugin where the motion is like you're dragging down because you're bringing the threshold down instead of driving the input signal up. And also in my evaluation, one thing that I found was the way that you're looking at it right now, even this final version, it really did obfuscate the intention of the process, my intention, and also the internal operation, which for a nonlinear effect is incredibly important. You want to know exactly in what order the processing is happening. And in my case, this interface, for example, implies that it's getting compressed and then crushed and then saturated, which is not at all what's happening. And then there's this nice mode button here that's like, what is this even doing? So and the people who evaluated the plugin, they pointed out those things in a much nicer manner than how I just described it. But yeah, that I think so. There's that raw, like, how do I use this? What is this for? And then I think that there's also just like the subjective, that's something, like I've definitely not used plugins because they like look a little offensive to me, I mean, it's never like this hurts my eyes, but there's definitely some plugins that's like,
Yeah.
No thanks.
Yeah, you brought up a great point in interface design where I think a lot of people, when they're using plugins, they don't even realize it. But when you first open a plugin, you tend to go towards the top left as the first kind of port of call, and then move to the right and down. And that can be very confusing if your signal chain, if the first thing that you have in your top left isn't the first process in the signal chain. I see so many people get that confused. The interface is so important to defining how people actually use plugins. Yeah, very interesting. And then from there, then you did an internship at Eventide, right?
I did, yeah. I interned while I was finished, like the summer I was taking Chuck's course and hitting my head against the wall with this like little basic juice demo. I was interning at Eventide. basically it was through a connection, another student in my program who had interned the year before, and he told me that interns there got to do real work and that it was a paid internship. So I applied and interviewed, and actually all the DSP intern and all the software engineering internships, they all were filled up by people with a little more experience. But the owner actually, he had this recording project that he wanted to do, like a little pet project, and he asked if I'd be willing to do that. So because of my audio engineering experience, so I spent the summer making recordings for Eventide, and also writing. I wrote, speaking of Python, I would say I learned most of my Python there, because I wrote this monster script that took a bunch of data from their H9000, their big flagship processor, and turned it into a nice PDF showing like all like 1,000 some algorithms, all the descriptions and data and stuff like that. So those are the two big things I did there.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. And so let's talk a little bit about the application process. Some people ask us all the time about getting internships. What should you say? What should you do? What did you think? What did you think it was that really led to you being to that internship? What was it on your profile? What was it on your in your skill set at the time that really led them to say, okay, yeah, you can come in and work with us?
I think for the internship, the fact that I had that personal connection was really really important to get attention in the first place.
Mm.
And so I guess I'll start at the beginning and the end, because in the beginning it was that, and then it was in the end I was lucky enough to have had this previous experience as an audio engineer. So I was willing to be flexible because I wanted to go there and do DSP or do like actually work more directly with products like the other interns did. But I chose to be flexible because I just wanted to be there, and I wanted to like learn from what was going on and actually see what the inside of an actual audio company looked like. But in terms of besides that, I mean, I tried to be really positive, and I actually don't remember. I think I showed a very, very rudimentary version of not even Valentine, but like of a juice project I did at the end of a class that was the first concept of Valentine.
Mm-hmm.
In order to, so even then, even though it was like not great by any means, I had something to show them to at least, I can put a few classes together and call it a plugin.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to set up my Xcode at the very least. And, I just went in there and I did my best. It was for Eventide, it was like basically like a ping-ponging between a bunch of different engineers there, where they all asked me different questions based on what their needs were going to be in terms of the work that they were doing, right? So I just did the best that I could, because that's the thing. Like it's really hard to. I think it's hard to. I think it's hard to prepare for a thing like that, and I think the most important thing is to even if they start asking you stuff that you have no idea what's going on, just to stay positive and power through it. And if you need to, just say, I don't know what that is. Like tell me about it. Because you can use. I feel like you can use those interviews as a good opportunity just to learn a bunch of stuff and to find out a lot of interesting things, even if the whole time you're like, oh, I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is. You're learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why it was important to also have something like a project, because it was a way that I could like direct the conversation towards something that I knew about and could be excited about, even if I kind of didn't totally, I wasn't on a very high or experienced level. So I wasn't able to like really say, oh, I'm doing this amazing thing, but at least I could show that I'm really passionate about it and that I care about algorithm design. I care about effects. You know, I know about effects. I understand the stakes. I just tried to show them who I was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you bring up a great point, which is that obviously it seems like you had some type of attraction towards Eventide as a company and the types of products they were making. And then the types of things that you were making seemed to match in some ways to what they were making. Plugins, basically, plugins, DSPFX, and that side of things. And that I've found for other people applying to positions that is very helpful. So if you're applying to a plugin company, it really helps if you've tried to build a plugin. Yeah. If you haven't built a plugin or given an attempt at a plugin, it's really tough to show people in a very tangible way why they should have you there at their company. But you brought up another great point, which is that from the opposite side, that companies, I don't know that companies do a very effective job in relaying what the necessary skill set for being a software developer in a music tech company is, and what the necessary skills are. There seems to be a misalignment maybe between what universities and educational institutions are teaching and what companies actually are looking for in terms of a skill set in audio developers. Do you think that that's the case, or would you disagree with that?
I think it's hard to say because it's such a small industry. And I think that might be part of why I think that at least I don't have enough experience to really know, but it seems to me that when you have a smaller company or a smaller operation, that it might be, I think it's a bigger overhead, right, to kind of put together a really rigorous system for acquiring talent, especially if like maybe you're not even like hiring a bunch of people like a year. Personally, I think that my mismatch just came from my personal desire to do something that just wasn't exactly on offer, at the university. And it was, and yeah, I guess it was born out of the acknowledgement, like that simply wasn't something that the program I was in. And there aren't that many programs that do focus on that so much. And I can't help but wonder if that's partially because it seems like a basic computer science education gets you a long way in this domain, because that's really that's a really important thing that actually one of my advisors told me. He told me that he had gone to some plugin company because he's an audio engineer and he's helped work on VSTs and things like that. And he observed that, their DSP team, or the team that was actually touching audio, was like 10% of the actual force of engineers.
Yeah.
And actually that's, I recently commented to some people on the forum, that there are people who are working as engineers in the audio industry that are not just C++ developers, right? Because there's like web developers, there's backend developers, there's a lot of different stuff. There's like, QA people that write a lot of Python and like run a lot of tests, So there's a lot of space, I think, for a lot of different skill sets as well, depending on what you want to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point as well, which is, and somebody in the chat, Leo, brought up a great point where he says that the skill set needed for audio programming is actually very broad to be able to develop a plugin from top to bottom, essentially. I mean, you're talking about the DSP, talking about interface design, you're talking about marketing, you're talking about C++, of course. There are so many skills that a person needs to be what I would call like kind of a full stack audio developer. And I think that those are quite rare. I don't really know a whole lot of people who could actually take a plugin take a plugin concept and deliver it from beginning to end, with interface and everything, and actually be able to go with the full package. A lot of people really specialize in one area. So you also did a internship with Newfangled Audio as well.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Who Newfangled are for people who aren't familiar, and a little bit about what you did.
Yeah. So Newfangled Audio is probably still best known right now for their Elevate mastering bundle. They make a really incredible limiter and EQ and clipper all in one plugin. That's actually how I found out about them first. But anyway, so Dan is an ex-Eventide guy. So the there's kind of that relationship. You get your Newfangled stuff via Eventide. So actually, I had met him before you connected us, because I remember I was messaging you and asking if you knew of any super entry level or intern stuff, and you told me that you knew this guy who did Newfangled Audio. I was like, oh, I know that guy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, because I messaged Dan and I said, I know somebody. He's really good. He's really enthusiastic. He's just getting in, but but I think he's got a lot of potential. And then I did the big reveal. It's this guy Jose. He's right in your area, New York, New Jersey. He's like, I know Jose. Oh, you just reminded me. I need to get in touch with him. And that it was great to see that happen. And then tell people about the product that you were part of.
Yeah, so I worked on this. I spent a lot of the remainder of my time at NYU, and basically all of the time between graduating on this bad boy, Generate, which is a very cool synthesizer based on double pendulum. A double pendulum oscillator that Dan, he was really fascinated with the concept of it, and went and turned it into a whole darn product. He had it he was basically looking for help to bring it over the finish line, and it started with me doing some very basic work on it, like writing very little things just to see if I could get the hang of writing code within his code base in the manner in which that he wanted. So I started, like 10 hours a week, and then as I got to know how and also how I learned a bunch more about DSP and writing actual optimized audio code, as I kind of got going with that, I started to work more and more hours, and eventually was kind of full time after I finished school. And I would still be there if I hadn't had the chance to do Ableton, honestly, because it was a really great experience, and it's honestly, in a lot of ways the reason I'm at Ableton, because the raw just amount of time I spent writing code there, and then also being exposed to just a bunch of different types of problem solving, like in a lot of domains. It's actually hard to talk about, because it's like, just to list the types of things I got to do there is like, it just sounds like a big mishmash of, from GUI to algorithm design, so it's like, it was awesome. Yeah.
Wow. And it would be great to hear a little bit more about that adjustment from, I'm very curious to hear about the transition from working on a product like Valentine, which was your own creation, your own way, to working on production level software. Tell me about some of the growing pains or some of the experiences of that. What needed to change? What what were some of the more challenging steps for you with that?
I think, well, first off, there was always the comfort of it being a plugin. And so I was familiar with the general patterns of, how you process audio in a plugin. But the hardest part was um, the manner in which everything was implemented, right, was just much different from anything I'd encountered, right? And that was from the low level syntax, right, like from to the broader and the broader patterns, as well as to like how different processing gets called, and how the files are all structured in the file system, in the repository. Yeah, so there was a lot of, I think the biggest learning curve, because synthesizers are hard. They're really they're really hard, and especially when you're dealing with something that has multiple voices, it gets very complicated very fast, and it can be hard to understand those systems.
What's the hardest? What do you feel is the hardest part? Understanding the routing, or understanding what's happening at a given moment in time?
I think the hardest thing to understand for me was always the voice architecture. So what this, and then how that interacted with I guess the abstraction of the voice, right? Because there's the voice as in this bundle of data that's like, this is like essentially the note that you're on, and this is the whether the note actually is on, this is the velocity, all this stuff, right? And then there's how an oscillator is responding to all the data that's generated from that, right? So it's like getting that abstraction through my head was always really, really hard, because I don't think that I don't have much experience. So when I say I haven't seen a way to build a system like that didn't kind of warp your brain a little bit. But that's not saying much, because I haven't seen many. But yeah, it was just understanding. So I think the main thing that was challenging about that is that in trying to, it's very hard to just logic out the code, to like look at it and say, oh, okay, like from line to line, I understand why this is happening, because you've got a lot of different things being called, and you have a lot of state that's being kept track of. And it's like, oh, where is this state? Is this state in this object, or is it in some inherited object or some inherited class or something like that? So it's just complexity, complexity just, it makes it just hard to like read. For me, it feels like a little weight on my forehead, when I'm trying to read something that's just complex by nature. And then you just memorize, you kind of just memorize a bunch of stuff, and you start being able to interact with the code base a little more fluently. And then eventually maybe you start refactoring and try to reduce some of that complexity whenever you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you bring up a great point. I mean, we're in the middle of, on the channel, of doing a very simple synthesizer tutorial. And one thing that is interesting to me is that you have something like, we recently did frequency modulation, and we were taking the thing is that you go, and I think this is one of the bigger challenges in DSP as well that I find, is that you go to a website and maybe you see an equation for frequency modulation, and you think, okay, well, I just need to take that equation, I just need to convert that into code, and boom, you're there. But the problem is that those different parts of the equation are happening at different points in time. And sometimes you need to take data, you need to store it somewhere, and then you need to relay it into another function that's happening elsewhere. So for example, with an FM, implementing FM, for example, you might have you have your wave, your FM wave, your modulating wave, and then what you need to do is you need to store where that's the value of where that's at, and then you need to actually implement that not only when you're hitting another note, because when you hit another note and it's an FM and it has FM synthesis on it, it needs to know what the phase of the wave is at that particular time, but also when you're updating the wave as well, when you're making changes in the FM frequency or the FM depth, you also have to go back and you have to update it again. So it doesn't, I find that in these more complex systems, it's never quite as neat and tidy as what you see on a Wikipedia page. Yeah, so very interesting. And one of the things that you mentioned in your bio that you gave was about how you started off with these plugins and doing these, and now you're really interested in building and working in larger systems. So can you talk a little bit about that? What's led to this curiosity?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it just happened through my work at Newfangled, where I really loved doing the really close audio work, but I'm still realistic about it's not even about my abilities in terms of math and calculus and stuff like that, but it's more of just that feeling of when I look at some really hard coding thing, I'm like, cool, let's learn about it. But when I see a really hard filter equation, I'm like, that sucks. I don't like this. I want to go home. I still do, even though I still love filters, and that's really what it came down to. I just started enjoying just the actual software engineering part of it. And when I thought about the things I was really proud of working on at Newfangled, it was those features that, required a really deep consideration about the design of the system.
Yeah, very interesting. And let's talk a little bit about what led to this this journey with Ableton. So how did that happen?
I saw a tweet from Anna, who gave that great talk at ADC 2020 about prototyping and about the perils of improving legacy code. She tweeted that that they were looking for developers, and at that point I was confident enough in my abilities to message her and say that I was interested, and so that started I think from that time to the time I got an offer was 6 months. Probably would have been significantly shorter had it not been for COVID. But yeah, so that was it was a lot. It was some interviews and some kind of coding stuff, and it was super great actually, because I got you're meeting the people on the team and learning about all their backgrounds and stuff like that, and yeah, you get to work with them a little bit just so they get a vibe of which is I feel like that's kind of I also interviewed at Apple a few I don't know, forever ago now, and I feel like it was a similar interview process, where you just interact with a lot of different team members, and the Apple interview was a little more challenging. I feel like I don't mean it that way. I mean I felt like I was really being tested. Do you know your at the Apple interview? It was almost adversarial to a certain extent, which definitely was not the feeling at Ableton. Anyway, but the point is that there's you spend several hours meeting the 7 or 8 people that you'd be working with, and talking to a supervisor and getting, they're getting a read on you from like what your general disposition is to what your coding skill is, and whether whether they think you're going to be suited to the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you bring up a lot of great points. One of the points that I wanted to key in on was that you said when you were getting ready to apply to it, that you felt that you were ready. You felt that you stood a good chance there. And one thing that I noticed about your progression, your career progression, was that it started off kind of, it had a very kind of linear curve to it. It started with Python and non-real-time processing. Then you went C++. Then it went Valentine, from kind of very rough plugin to something that kind of resembles a finished plugin, to then you had Eventide in there as well, to Newfangled, and then to Ableton. And it really reminds me of a book that I read not too long ago by somebody named Cal Newport, called So Good They Can't Ignore You, where it talks essentially about being able to take your skills, take skills that you have, and essentially kind of trade up to new skills. So it's like you had the skills that you had with Valentine, and you leveraged those skills to get into Eventide, and then you leveraged Eventide and Valentine to get into Newfangled. Then you leveraged all of Newfangled and the other two things to get into Ableton eventually. So whereas I think sometimes maybe people try to go from 0 to 10 like immediately. So it seems like there was a point where you felt that you had what it took to work at a company like that. Okay, you've worked now you've worked on Dan's system, on Dan's synth at Newfangled, and you've worked in a bigger system and a bigger code base, and now you're ready to trade into that and basically get yourself into Ableton. So, talking a little bit about what those skills were, can you discuss? So, people always ask, and we had Spencer Rudnick, who was here about 6 months ago and spoke a little bit about the skills. And I'm interested to hear what you think. Okay, when somebody says, I want to work at Ableton, what does it take to be an audio software engineer at a company like Ableton?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think a willingness to take on, big challenges. And
so it's not even about coding. It's about something personal outside of just coding. Then
I think it's about a lot of things. I mean, because it's about, like having the proficiency to do the job, right? To write good modern C++, and to know the general workflows of working on code with other people. But also, I think for me personally, it was I think it was a lot about not being afraid of big challenges, and also being good at communicating, not just about who you are, or how to answer questions well, but how to explain yourself. I think a lot of attention was paid to how do I problem solve, and how do I talk about the manner in which I problem solve.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I know that you can't tell too many details about what you do, what you work on. Can you tell us a little bit about your team? How many people do you work with on your team?
I work with directly just one or two other people on the things that I'm working on right now, and then there's a larger team that we're part of that kind of covers a bigger area. So that's been really great. It feels like a good combination of being able to kind of do direct work, which is a very small group, and then also have this bigger picture of and then our work, often, just like anything else, often it involves talking to other teams as well that are, scattered across the organization. Yeah.
Can you just give us a brief walkthrough of what a typical day might be like for you? I imagine it might change from day to day, but just a typical day in your 4 weeks that you've been enabled to.
Yeah, well, today, I mean, it's been a lot of onboarding, so a lot of meeting. Actually, so I started today with a Zoom meeting with a team member that I hadn't met before, just to talk about whatever. And then I had a check-in with a product owner. And then I spent the rest of the day with one of my team members just working on things directly. And
On code or?
yeah, on code.
Okay.
And, that can be literally working on code or talking about working on code. And most of my days have been a variation of that, just but with, a heavy emphasis on getting to know you type things, of course, just like any other company would do.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Let's see. I'm trying to think if we have if anybody else has any other questions, please ask. I'm running out of questions. So one question that we have from Julius is if this plugin is available anywhere, Valentine, that is.
No, not yet.
Okay, great. So are you going to release it or are you going to open source it? Or is that?
I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I think I'm going to. I think I owe it to myself to kind of finish it, and do something proper with it. But I want to give myself a nice amount of time to adjust to my environment here, and just chill.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think is the biggest jump? Did you feel like there was a big jump for you between working at like Newfangled and the code base you were working at there versus what you're doing now at Ableton, where you've gone into Ableton? Did it feel like, whoa, this is like a whole different world? This is a whole different way? Or did you feel like, okay, I got a good handle on this with a little bit of experience, I can get in there and I can jam?
It's definitely different. I think that the scope is a lot different, and the kind of the number of moving parts is definitely, a lot different. So it's been a bit of adjustment for sure, and it's been learning to just kind of step back and take more time just understanding what's going on, as opposed to feeling the need to immediately start, getting in there and committing, getting stuff up there on the Git.
Nice. There's a question from Thomas. How difficult did living in the US make getting a job in Europe, I guess, in terms of visas and things like that?
That's a good question. I mean, again, like COVID made everything weird. So we had to do a lot of things differently. We had to get our visas beforehand, and which is kind of backwards from the way that I guess most people typically do it, at least because in Germany, for an American, you can typically come into Germany for a few months before you actually have to get your visa to be there. But we basically needed to get our visas in order to show the border authorities that we had a very good reason to be entering the country from a high risk country during the pandemic. So it was a lot of stress to get the work together, but it was worth it.
Did you feel as a person that was needing to have your visa sponsored, did you feel, and this may not be, you may not know this, did you feel that the bar might have been higher than if you were actually living in Germany? Probably a difficult
That's a
question to answer.
yeah. I have no idea. That's a very good question, though. I mean, uh, yeah. I mean, I think. Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I haven't thought of it.
Good question. Okay. Another question is, do you speak German? Which I know that you do not. That's
Not yet. Working on it.
And in communicating in the office, everybody speaks English, right? So, yeah. So I think that answers that question. Yeah, I think that's everything. Was there anything that you wanted to add? I know that you had a presentation or that you had some slides that you wanted to present. Was there anything that we missed out on that you wanted to touch on?
I don't think so. No, I think that it. I mean, nothing besides the fact that I think that a lot of the reason I'm here is because of a willingness to go out and find people who are interested in what I was doing, and also to ask for a lot of help. Yeah, that's pretty much that's pretty much it.
Yeah, sounds like you did a lot of seeking yourself for knowledge and a lot of self motivation. I think that's quite important. And yeah, that's it's great to see. It's great to see you transition into this role. You definitely deserve it, and you've worked hard for it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
I mean, okay, let's start with this one. So, as I understood, you basically wanted to make like plugins, audio processing plugins. So, what was your expectation, and how does it compare to what you actually got?
That's a great question. I mean, I knew it was going to be hard. You know what? I think I didn't realize how much time I was going to spend on UI. I think that's definitely the part that's always been the most challenging and honestly frustrating for me, especially metering and doing any kind of like, animations and stuff like that. That's always, I think that was the thing that was the biggest just the thing I hadn't thought of that is insanely important.
We do have a question from Michael asking if you use like Big O notation in Ableton, or have you used it in your professional work at all?
Not really. Most times, I mean, in my experience, it seems like right when you're writing, because I'm assuming this is kind of a question about optimization.
Yeah, I think it's just because you know that a lot of computer science programs, they really talk a lot about Big O notation and things like that. And I think this question alludes to the importance, I guess, of knowing it out in the real world.
Honestly, if there's anything that I stress about, is it's about memory allocation and whether or not something is going to force one. And the complexity of an algorithm, I think, is something that we think about after the fact, like when you can actually measure the performance of the system, and then you can actually see that there's something wild going on somewhere, and maybe you can do better.
Have you done any testing or anything like that? Have you worked with any testing before?
Yeah, I've done a bunch of profiling with just Xcode's default the stock instruments.
Yeah, that seems to be a big trend at the moment. Is a big trend on testing, profiling in audio. A trend that I think should definitely continue, and that I should probably get on that train myself. Yeah. Great. Did you have any other questions, Pavel?
Yeah, I remember the other question. So, what do you prototype a plugin by combining the existing like processing plugins or like pieces, or do you like sit down, write code, like with basic UI and start from there? How do you get interesting effects?
It depends. The first thing I did, that was using things off of the shelf. But I've also started with, going into the literature and basically coding something out just to see what it sounds like, and then starting from there, and then and I know that some people they like to use Max for things like that. But I've always felt that I'm a little bit faster just using Juice to write out simple stuff, especially since there's all the DSP functions. I know a lot of people use Python, do Python as well for that prototyping. I also actually because I kind of had a middle step for my effect, where at least for the compression part, I was prototyping. I had 3 different algorithms that I was prototyping in Python to compare and see what I wanted to start implementing in C++.
Nice. Any other questions, Pavel?
Not from the top of my head.
Great. Just going to have a look at the chat. Doesn't look like we have any other questions from the crowd either. So it looks like we are at a good place where we can end, and right on time as well. Thank you very much, Jose. I think that'll yield some great insights for people who are looking to get into the industry. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Thanks for having me on.
Great. And thank you once again, Pavel, for your amazing visualization and explanation on sample rate and aliasing. Once again, I will put the link to that in the description of the video, and I hope that a bunch of people go there, and I'll definitely direct people there in the future when they're trying to learn the basics. Before we sign off, just want to give a big thank you once again to our sponsors for the meetup, Juice, Focusrite, and Sonux. Thank you. And also, if you happen to run into Timur virtually, please give him well wishes. He wasn't feeling 100% today, so we wish him a safe recovery. I'm sure he'll be fine, and that he'll be back with us for next month. For now, thank you to everybody as well for tuning in. Let's keep the discussion going on our audio programming community on Discord. You can join via the website, theaudioprogrammer.com/community. And for now, we will sign off. Thank you very much to both of you, and we will see you again soon. Okay.